Some of this gets really, really ugly. And I'll give you an example. Samantha Power is funding the machine so that they all get here.
Samantha Power's net worth increased from 21 to 24 from an estimated 6.7 million to 16.5 million to around 30 million. How did that happen?
Some of this gets really, really ugly. And I'll give you an example of this. USAID is doing that, and it was administered for the whole of the Biden administration by Samantha Power. Samantha Power's husband, and I don't normally feel it's appropriate to mention family members, but they are both political and in the Biden administration's government doing a 1-2 punch on this issue. So, this is not about the personal. This is just because these two things are connected. Cass Sunstein was a very infamous figure in conservative world for a long time because he was the author, I believe in 2007, 2008, of a famous white paper called Conspiracy Theories, which made the argument that the U.S. federal government needs to infiltrate the online space and infiltrate the cognitive intelligentsia of alternative movements. At the time, he was concerned about things like 9/11 conspiracy theories on YouTube, undermining the diplomatic posture and standing of the United States and our military posture. If these theories gain steam, it would massively degrade the ability to wage war in Afghanistan and Iraq and build an international coalition. And so he made the argument, and I'm not weighing in on this, by the way, substantively, but this is simply what he said, and everyone can look this up. This is Samantha Power's husband, who then joined Samantha Power on the other end of this. Actually, maybe I'll start with that side of the story. He moved over while Samantha Power was head of USAID, running this program, spending $1.5 billion to fund illegal immigrants to make their way from foreign countries into our country illegally. DHS is responsible for managing that and stopping that and catching them. Cass Sunstein moved over to DHS in order to help run the immigration policy, where he was basically a senior advisor on immigration policy around the open border that left the whole thing open. So you have the 1-2 punch. Samantha Power is funding the machine so that they all get here. And, her husband is a DHS, creating and popularizing and implementing the policies that make sure there's catch and release and the whole thing's open and we can't do anything to stop them once they get here. So, interagency approval, you might say, but it's all in-house right there. But the other part of this gets back to the role of USAID in psychological operations and why USAID needs to lie about what it does abroad and why it needs to lie about what it does to our own oversight organs and the people, the U.S. citizens who vote for it. So Sunstein writes this, conspiracy theories thing, and he argues, whether you agree with it or not, a lot of people would never even think about that, when they're considering the merits of such a thing, that these things, if they gain steam, have massive diplomatic implications. You're going to convince France to, contribute to the war effort. You're going to convince Germany and the UK, or, while they see things on YouTube that make their own parliamentarians or prime minister, question the predicate for it. You can understand the national security impulse to want to do this work. I'm not saying that's the thing to do, by the way, believe me. But so it was called Conspiracy Theories, this initial paper, and it made the argument that the U.S. federal government needs to develop a new capacity to infiltrate these movements and develop methods to either neutralize them or reroute their cognitive thought leadership in order to avoid the outcome that results in free and unfettered alternative media popularizing ideas that could undermine the workings of the State Department or the U.S. military. Then quickly thereafter, he writes a book called Nudge. Nudge is basically the holy Bible for the censorship industry. And it's basically required reading for anyone who wants to have a career in countering disinformation, or disinformation studies, if you will, or information integrity, or digital resilience, or media literacy. This is the sort of, it lays out the gospel. And it's called Nudge because it's a book about how to get people to do things without top-down coercion, the appearance of autocratic, coercive control, but getting them to do it anyway. How do you, instead of shove people to do it, because that's what Russia and China do, nudge them. Find a way to get them to do it without your fingerprints being on it, without it drawing the same critiques that would have if the Russian or Chinese government decide to do this. And what it's about, it's about creating this kind of whole of society surround sound. The State Department wants to do it, DOD wants to do it, CIA wants to do it, USAID wants to do it. Okay? We don't need to make it formal government policy. We don't need to throw people in jail if they do it. We need to create, and nudge itself was primarily about the behavioral role of this, but also the behavioral psychology behind this, but also about the role of institutions in making this happen. But what you do is instead of doing top down, you astroturf a bottom up, and you create a middle out and a whole society. You want people to feel like their lives will be over if they challenge it, but you can't criminalize it. We have a First Amendment. Well, what if you raise the costs of that behavior? It's incentives, it's carrots and sticks. How do we heighten the cost of doing that? What assets do we need in civil society in order to achieve this? Well, if they're deplatformed, they can't access their wedding photos and baby photos because they're kicked off Facebook, or they see a friend of theirs was and can no longer DM with grandma because they posted about, hey, these vaccines may have come from the Wuhan lab, or these vaccines may have been funded by, the U.S. government, or they might not work, or we shouldn't go through with a mandate. We don't want to throw people in jail for that yet, maybe, because a lot of these same folks have now started to talk about, well, maybe the fundamental problem is the First Amendment itself, and that's why they are all working with the EU and the UK and foreign governments like Brazil to make this happen. But okay, so get the social media companies to demonetize them, deplatform them, do algorithmic suspension. Okay, that's one thing we can do. What's another thing we can do? Well, we can do defamations and lawsuit. We can use lawfare, and we can make high-profile cases of this. And there were, examples of this in documents of the affirmative planning of finding a sympathetic plaintiff to make an example out of these media companies to do this. And these were published before things like Dominion and some of these other, lawsuits and around these cases. How can you create vocational penalties for doing this? So, for example, you don't need to arrest them, but have Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, implement policies that he goes on live television and proudly says, "No jab, no job." It's going to, you can't earn a living if you believe these things or spread information around that. Tony Fauci himself, and the eternal shame of it is it took 4 years after COVID, 3 years after COVID, for these emails to come out, said that one of the best ways to actually get people to go through to get citizen buy-in for the vaccine rollout and stop these vaccine conspiracy theories is to raise the cost of people saying them, and that you need to make it hurt. And that will, he said that in so many words, and everyone can look up this receipt. I have, I've reposted this 20 times on my X account. It's been played on Fox News. I believe there's an audio file with it as well. But that was not, the criminal justice system. This was not the Attorney General of the United States, but it was the key administrator of the entire public health system during the COVID response, saying the fundamental guiding tenet of it is make it hurt. Make it hurt. Change the incentive so that if people question what we're doing, it costs them their livelihoods. It costs them their social media accounts. It costs them their standing. It costs them their medical licenses. Make it worse than prison. Because at least you spend a year in prison, you come out, you still got your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, you still got your business license. You can serve your time and come back to society. When you lose all these things, you often lose them forever, at least until Elon, acquired X and sought that, set that free.
Mm-hmm. And Samantha Powers' net worth increased from 21 to 24 from an estimated 6.7 million to 16.5 million to around 30 million.
The ex-chief of the USAID, Samantha Power, reportedly experienced a spike in her net worth during the time she served as the chief of USAID, the organization that oversees hundreds of billions of dollars in global funding, and is now under intense scrutiny from DOGE audits being conducted by Elon Musk and his team. According to Inside Biden's Basement and financial records, Power made $180,000 a year as Joe Biden's appointee. In those 3 years, her wealth jumped from $6.7 million to a whopping $30 million, leaving many on social media questioning how her net worth made such a significant jump in such a short amount of time. DOGE has uncovered what Musk calls fraudulent spending by the USAID, with President Donald Trump asserting that lawmakers choosing to send tens of billions of dollars to foreign countries for things like transgender programs or Sesame Street in Iraq are actually getting kickbacks at the expense of American taxpayers. Investigators across the U.S. have made a handful of arrests in recent weeks connected to heists involving some of the biggest names in sports. Authorities say groups of thieves linked to South American gangs have been stealing jewelry and cash from luxury homes. They've been targeting the likes of the NFL's Patrick Mahomes just this past week. Federal authorities charged a group of Chilean men with stealing nearly $300,000 worth of items from Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow.
In Dallas, Christina Wild, Salem News Channel.
How did that happen?
Well, I haven't seen the source documents. I've seen this be reported. I haven't, double, triple, checked that. I've seen that as headlines, and so I'm not affirmatively, weighing into that until I, see the source of those numbers myself. But so I don't know her particular case, but what frequently happens in other high level scenarios like this is you have stakeholders who, now, first of all, so there's a few things, right? There's always the potential. So let me remove it from the Samantha Power thing, because I just want to be respectful and note that I just don't know that for a fact. But let's just call this Cynthia P word. Cynthia P words. We'll call it Cynthia instead of Samantha. Okay, random example, not her. There are many ways that this kind of radical jump in wealth can be acquired. Now, first of all, I also don't know if that's a cumulative household income that includes the net worth of her husband. This is also a frequent thing I know in reporting disclosures. Oftentimes, you don't need to just report your own income. You need to report the combined income of family members, and so that, because that's often how money is laundered, right? You saw this with the Biden family, for example. And when you apply for a security clearance, they need to know if you're holding your assets. You declare this much income, but actually the house is owned in the name of your wife. And so it looks like, you have a $5 million home, but it's your home, you live in it. Any moment you could change the deed, back to your thing. So oftentimes there are equity interests or large asset interests that are combined. So again, I don't know in this case, but there are a few things. First of all, you have insider knowledge in these cases. So talking generally about this, because this is, the famous Nancy Pelosi tracker about how she does this. And I talk about this frequently. This is why there is a pipeline from blob to banker. The people who administer U.S. foreign policy and are insiders and have national security clearances and know everyone in the business and know everyone in the network and know everything they're up to next and their whole inside thought process, and they have access to the classified documents, and they know, sure is a staring into a magic 8-ball, or maybe like a fortune teller. They know, they can see the swirling purple clouds inside the glass of what the CIA is going to do, what the DOD is going to do, what the State Department is going to do, what the USAID is going to do in Ukraine next, in Congo next, in Venezuela next. They know, or have a really good insider trader's advantage knowledge of whether there's going to be a coup, for example, in that country that opens up that country's natural resources to privatization. Is the oil and gas going to be, privatized in Turkmenistan, and you are a part of a Goldman Sachs fund? Like, this is how you get these things. Like Jared Cohen from the State Department's policy planning staff, then creating Google Jigsaw, which played the tip of the spearhead role in internet censorship AI super weapons and works closely with the U.S. State Department and DHS CISA for censorship work, as well as foreign academic institutions like the Cambridge University Social Decision Making Lab, which is partnered with all these groups that does psychological inoculation work funded by the U.S. taxpayer in part or partnered in part. What did Jared Cohen do right after going to Jigsaw? Went to Goldman Sachs and he's doing like macroeconomic and global policy there. Well, what does he bring to the table? Let's see, the State Department's policy planning staff and that whole network where it was basically the CIA branch of Google, that he was interliaising with that whole time. He brings the whole network. How is he able to help Goldman Sachs make investment predictions so that they're one step ahead of the market? Well, it's not technically insider trading, in the sense that it's directly at the portfolio company with advanced knowledge of their business line and some 10b-5 securities violation. It is the great unstated insider trading reason that there is this blob to banker pipeline.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.